Hi, and welcome to week 5 of your Troy Literature course. Week 5 is really going to be where we get to establish a sense of understanding of modernism. We're also going to be focused on exploring and continue to explore some of those tenets that you picked up in relation to the poetry that you looked at in week 4, which we will talk about here in a minute. In addition, one of the other things that is happening right now is that your midterm is open. So please make sure that you go through ProctorU for your midterm. It is open from the 7th at 6 a.m. So yesterday at 6 a.m. it opened up, and it will be open until the 21st at midnight. And I want to give a big shout out to Sonia, who sent me an email because she was setting up her account and ProctorU, and of course this was the way that I kind of was aware that I hadn't sent you guys an email. So thank you so much, Sonia. As I mentioned, with the midterm, the one thing that you're going to want to take a look at is under the discussion board. There is a, under week 6, so it's after the modernism and poetry section, there is a little study guide. You may take the study guide with you. It is something that is portable. You can use your books and your hard copy notes for the midterm. You cannot use anything that's accessible through the internet, so make sure that you print out everything that you need. Make sure that you have your study guide and of course your book. But these are all going to be aspects that you can go ahead and pull into account for your midterm. Now, as far as kind of giving you guys some parameters, and in relation to what we explored, we really looked at modernism. And you looked at some really hard poetry too. T.S. Eliot is not an easy poet to read, and The Wasteland is one of the seminal works of the modernist period. In fact, if you want to know modernism, you should really read The Wasteland. The Wasteland is much more of an encyclopedia of experiences related to the modernist period, and it is very much a kind of a encapsulation, as Jules Spears Brooker mentioned, of the 20th century. There were some notes here about, the value of the work and, of course, what you would like to read. I also did a little breakdown of the Portrait d'une Femme, which gave you a sense of kind of how to wrestle with poetry, and I hope that it modeled in a way how you would engage poetry, from what does it really say, kind of what does it mean, and what is the value of this poetry or this poem. Now, many of you have really kind of got yourself more comfortable with the discussion postings, and I want to applaud you for that. Remember that the discussion board is where we're having our... In many ways, what we do in the discussion board is what we really are ultimately going to be doing if we were in a classroom. So we want to think about some of those concepts when we're responding. And I really appreciate you taking a look at the rubric and seeing how you can more accurately respond to each other. And that's really where we're... In addition, I do think that you guys have done a great job of responding to the ramping up. Remember, each week it gets a little more difficult, and that's okay, because you're building on your awareness, so you should be getting a little more stronger. I know that many of you, as Angelica mentioned, were confused by some of the poetry, in particular in The Station of the Metro, which very much is a different type of poem. The poem is kind of, it's a couple words. It really is just a snippet, but it has such power, and it completely moved forward a whole genre of poetry. Many of you did mention that, though. And Jennifer Shepard, I do have to applaud you for saying, thought you'd be interested, but you weren't interested at all in the poetry. And that they needed to have, I guess you'd say, the Wasteland needed to have kind of this different unpacking that you required. Travis Kern, Travis, I really do appreciate that you really kind of focused on that one line from Marianne Moore where you said, We do not admire what we cannot understand. And that is the tension with poetry, is that it's hard for us to get it, but it seems like it should be so easy because it's a few lines, it's a few words, but it's so packed. In many ways, it has what Hemingway would call, which you're going to be reading this week, the aspect of parataxis, or the iceberg principle, in that we can only see a little bit above the surface and there's so much below it. And it takes so much effort to kind of wrestle that out. And Asia also mentioned this too, that there was this need for a message or an anecdote. And in the modern poems and poetry, there really isn't that sense of message. Colin had a fantastic exploration of the poetry, and also an idea that modernism, is something to wrestle with, because the definition still hasn't been penned down. Modernism is kind of the undoing or unraveling of ontological and epistemological certainty following basically, or at the beginning of World War One. So we had World War One and World War Two kind of as the bookends for modernism, and there was this real sense of a lack of knowing how to be, or ontological certainty, and a real lack of kind of understanding or comfort in knowing how we know, or the lack of epistemological certainty that did occur. And that's why these poems are often, and the readings are often, a little more tense or a little more pessimistic in some ways. Fantastic posting, William, on this tension in the poetry, that the first poem you read was in the state. Also, Russell, great posting. You really kind of captured the imagery of in the station of the metro, which was key. Modesty, good. I think you're getting your postings done much more kind of, I guess you'd say, with clarity and with evidence, and I appreciate you doing that. I think that Sonia's observations, supported by the evidence from the poem, is just key. Your reading of you, Selwyn Mobberly, is fantastic. You really kind of pulled in the detail and references, specifically in reference to war and the wartime. And I like that you mentioned rereading, because that's really what poetry requires. Now, Stephanie also mentioned this kind of modernist sensibility that appears in The River Merchant's Wife, which is much more of a readerly poem than the other poetry, but still is very tense and very kind of dense. Let's see, Sadie also is pulling in some of the information, also preparing for the future reference to Hemingway and, of course, Fitzgerald. April, I love that you focused on The Wasteland as being a compilation of stories. And as I mentioned, The Wasteland is an encyclopedia of sorts. When T.S. Eliot set forward to write this piece, he really wanted to capture kind of the landscape, both physical and geographical, but also mental, psychic, and physical. The sense of fracturing that did occur, and you did capture that so well, and I love the use of the evidence, the actual line, something different from either. That really does show this sense of tension. And I do think Virgil's post, fantastic. Excellent exploration of both Eliot and Pound. Pound is an interesting fellow. He actually ended up in a sanatorium in the United States, accused and pretty much convicted of treason, because at the end of kind of in the middle of World War II, he pledged allegiance to Mussolini. And so he is a weird little fellow. So he definitely, by the end of his life, had accepted some alternate points of view. So I like that you mentioned the uniqueness of his writing, because it definitely will pop up in other aspects of his life too. Nice work, Sadie, with your overview of kind of Pound and his biography, but also of Marianne Moore's innovation. She is one of the women that we are reading in a very masculine arena, and she really did pull forward this information. So I think that, overall, these were some great connections, and I really do look forward to seeing kind of the exploration that you do in week 5 is building on this. Week 5 builds on this modernist sensibility. I mentioned Hemingway and Fitzgerald, but you'll also be reading You'll be reading Anderson, Sherwood Anderson, and Catherine Ann Porter. You'll also be entering a little bit more into poetry too, some shorter poems and some more concise poems for you to try your hand at. Please take a look under the assignment area under week 5. There is a podcast on style, which can help you kind of to get more comfortable. Once again, your readings, reflections, etc. You guys are doing great. You'll be focusing on week 5. You can go ahead if you would like to. You can take the midterm. The midterm is open now, and it will be open until the 21st at midnight. Remember, you need to use ProctorU to take it, and you can use your notes, hard copy, and your book. If you guys do have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. I look forward to seeing how you interpret and engage the short fiction and also the poetry. Have a great day and keep in touch.